Keanu Reeves steps into a high-end restaurant in the heart of the city, dressed in simple, slightly wrinkled clothes, as though he just wrapped up an ordinary day. He picks a quiet table, hoping to stay out of the spotlight, while the soft glow of crystal chandeliers fills the space around him. Before he even has a chance to look over the menu, a waitress approaches, her posture arrogant, her expression one of clear disdain. "Are you sure you can afford to be here?" she snaps, her voice dripping with sarcasm. What happens next will not only leave everyone in the restaurant speechless, but will also reveal a truth that shifts everything. But before we continue, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow at 12:30 p.m., we've got another incredible story just for you. The Lumiere restaurant, located in Beverly Hills, is the epitome of sophistication. Nestled along one of the city's most exclusive streets, its wide windows offer a stunning view of neon lights and sleek sports cars cruising by. Inside, every detail is meticulously designed to impress. Lumiere isn't just a place to eat, it's a destination for those who want to be seen, admired, and envied. Ashley, one of Lumiere's most seasoned waitresses, moves through the dining room with grace and confidence. Her perfectly styled hair, tailored uniform, and polished smile make her the image of efficiency and poise. Working at such an esteemed restaurant wasn't just a job to Ashley, it was a privilege, and one she took great pride in. She loved telling everyone about her role in such an exclusive venue. But Ashley had another side, one of arrogance. She had a knack for sizing up customers, quickly judging them based on their clothes, demeanor, and appearance. Some people just don't belong here, she often thought. As the restaurant's glass door swings open, a man enters. He's dressed in worn-out jeans, a simple shirt, and a jacket that looks comfortable but lacks any hint of luxury. His presence is quiet, almost invisible, as he walks up to the reception desk. It's Keanu Reeves, one of Hollywood's most beloved stars, yet he blends in as just another regular customer. He doesn't care about showing off his fame or wealth. Ashley, busy with a reservation for a VIP guest, notices Keanu. Her conversation halts abruptly as she looks him up and down, a clear expression of disdain creeping onto her face. He doesn't fit the typical Lumiere clientele. With barely contained judgment, she tilts her head, slowly eyeing his scuffed boots. "Good evening," she says, her voice flat, forcing a smile that disappears almost immediately. "How can I help you?" "I'd like a table, please," Keanu replies, calm and polite. Ashley raises an eyebrow, as if his request is absurd. Her arms cross, her smile vanishing completely. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" "This is a very exclusive restaurant," she says, her tone dripping with skepticism. Keanu remains unfazed. "Yes, this is the place," he responds coolly. Ashley, her patience clearly thinning, scoffs, "Just a moment. I need to check something." She walks off to the reception office, tapping his name into the reservation system with exaggerated flair. When nothing comes up, she rolls her eyes and storms back into the dining area, visibly annoyed. "As I suspected, you don't have a reservation," she says, her voice thick with sarcasm. "We do have a few tables, but just so you know, this isn't your average dining spot." Keanu remains calm. "I'd like to dine here," he says again, his voice unshaken. Ashley lets out an exaggerated sigh, snatching a menu and snapping it open. "Fine. I'll seat you in a suitable area. Follow me." She strides briskly across the dining room, not once looking back to see if he's following. When they reach the farthest, least desirable corner of the restaurant, she slams the menu down on the table. "Here you go. This table is perfect for you," she says, her tone sugary sweet but insincere. "If you need anything, let me know. But only if it's really necessary, okay?" Keanu, still smiling slightly, ignores her tone. "Thank you. I'm sure this will be an interesting experience." As Ashley walks away, she mutters loud enough for a nearby couple to hear, "He won't last 5 minutes here. Bet he'll leave as soon as he opens the menu." Across the room, Keanu calmly flips open the menu, his eyes scanning the options without a hint of haste. The live music plays softly in the background, but it's clear that something much bigger is about to unfold. The table where Keanu sat, making sure to give him cold, judgmental glances. Her every step was calculated, as though she were daring him to say something, anything, that would confirm her assumptions. But Keanu remained calm, unbothered, as though the world around him had no power to disturb his peace. His posture, relaxed but alert, fascinated Ashley. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't break him. She finally returned with his main course, her footsteps echoing sharply across the floor. With a flourish, she set the plate down in front of him, her eyes gleaming with a mix of spite and satisfaction. "Here's your fillet, as you requested," she said with a sickly sweet tone. "Enjoy." Keanu glanced down at the dish, then back up at Ashley, his smile still present but now more knowing. "Thank you. It looks wonderful." He said it so casually, as if her every attempt at disdain had simply bounced off him. Ashley, not getting the response she craved, turned on her heel and sauntered off, her eyes narrowing as she muttered under her breath, "He won't even finish that. You'll see." Yet, as time passed, Keanu remained composed, eating his meal with the same quiet appreciation he had shown from the moment he entered the restaurant. To Ashley's dismay, he wasn't rushing through the food, nor was he asking for water or anything else she'd predicted. He was simply enjoying the experience. Across the room, the elderly customer who had noticed Keanu earlier raised his glass once more, this time in silent approval. Keanu caught his eye and nodded politely, exchanging a quiet smile in return. It was a small, respectful gesture, but it spoke volumes, reminding the room that not all value is measured by outward appearances. Ashley, however, continued to watch him with growing frustration. Her smugness was turning into irritation as she began to realize that Keanu was not a person to be easily dismissed. He wasn't leaving. He wasn't reacting. He wasn't fitting into the role she had assigned him. Her behavior, meanwhile, became more erratic. She continued to prioritize other guests, deliberately letting Keanu's table sit untouched for long stretches of time. She laughed at a joke from one of her more glamorous customers, exaggerated her responses to an older couple's compliments, and even spent a few extra moments chatting with someone she deemed important. All the while, Keanu sat quietly, enjoying his meal without complaint. The other staff noticed. Some looked at her with raised eyebrows, others exchanged concerned glances. No one said anything, but it was clear that Ashley's petty behavior wasn't going unnoticed. The energy in the room had shifted, and Keanu, unknowingly, had become the calm center of a brewing storm. As the night wore on, Ashley's frustration boiled over. The more time passed, the more she realized that the person she'd written off as just another regular was proving to be anything but. Her annoyance reached a boiling point when she noticed Keanu finishing his main course without so much as a glance toward her. Then, with no warning, Keanu stood up from his seat. Ashley, sensing an opportunity to finally get the reaction she wanted, quickly straightened her posture, ready to confront him, perhaps with a final sarcastic remark, or a well-placed "I told you so." But before she could approach him, Keanu walked toward the front of the restaurant, his presence still remarkably understated despite the whispers swirling around him. As he passed the bar, the elderly customer from earlier raised his glass again, this time in a gesture of silent respect. The gesture was subtle, but it caught Ashley off guard. As Keanu reached the exit, he paused for a moment, turned, and smiled at the staff. "Thank you for the meal," he said, his voice calm and genuine. "It was perfect." With that, he left. And the restaurant, which had been full of judgment, disdain, and petty drama, was suddenly left in an unsettling silence. Ashley, still standing by the kitchen, stared after him, her lips parted in disbelief. The other staff members exchanged glances, some of them finally realizing the true value of a person was far more than what they wore or how much they could spend. But by then, it was too late. Keanu Reeves had already left, and in his quiet, unassuming way, he had shown everyone in that room what true dignity and grace looked like. Shifted uncomfortably but didn't respond. Ashley, sensing the tension, pressed on with an exaggerated sigh, letting her words linger in the air. I mean, it's one thing to be a regular customer, she continued, her tone dripping with condescension, but another to just waltz in like you belong. Keanu, still calm and composed, met her gaze once more, but said nothing. The smile remained on his face, though now it seemed to hold a touch of amusement, as if he were quietly observing the drama unfolding around him. Ashley, determined to provoke a response, made her way back to the bar, her mind racing for the next chance to undermine him. She caught the eye of a nearby couple, who exchanged a look of disbelief as they watched her take yet another swipe at Keanu. "I don't know how he can sit there like that," Ashley muttered, not even attempting to lower her voice. "Most people would be embarrassed, but I guess some just think they can take advantage of places like this without having any class or understanding of what it really takes to enjoy fine dining." The elderly couple at the nearby table, who had witnessed the entire ordeal, exchanged a quiet but heated conversation. The woman shook her head, and the man's frown deepened. "This is unbelievable," the man muttered. "He's clearly handling everything with such grace, and she's still trying to belittle him. We need to do something about this." Keanu, still enjoying his coffee, took notice of the couple's whispers, his attention shifting between them and the disgruntled waitress. He seemed to be aware of the growing tension, but rather than react to it, he merely sipped his coffee, his serene expression unwavering. His composure only seemed to annoy Ashley more, but she couldn't seem to break him. Meanwhile, Ashley was becoming more frantic, growing impatient with her inability to provoke even a shred of discomfort in him. The more she tried, the more his calmness seemed to frustrate her. Finally, after what seemed like hours, she approached his table again, this time with the check. As she placed the bill in front of him, her expression was a mixture of satisfaction and frustration, as if she expected him to finally show a sign of discomfort. "Here you go," she said, her voice feigning politeness but still laced with sarcasm. "I trust everything was to your liking?" Keanu glanced down at the check, then back up at her, his smile as calm and genuine as ever. "It was perfect, thank you," he replied. "I'll settle it right away." As he reached for his wallet, Ashley couldn't help but watch closely, eager to see his reaction when he saw the total. She had been certain all evening that this was where he would finally crack. But once again, he remained unfazed. With the payment settled, Keanu stood and looked around the room. His calm demeanor was like a quiet force, unaffected by the disapproving looks from some of the staff, or the sympathetic glances from a few of the other patrons. He gave a slight nod to the elderly couple who had been watching him with growing admiration, and then, without another word, he made his way to the exit. Ashley, standing by the bar, stared after him, her expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. She had done everything in her power to provoke him, belittling his appearance, making snide comments about his meal, and even trying to make him feel out of place. But in the end, he had shown nothing but grace, humility, and composure, completely unfazed by her attempts. As the door closed behind him, the room seemed to shift. The energy had changed. The patrons who had observed the evening's unfolding drama began to speak more openly, their voices now filled with admiration for the man who had remained so calm under such deliberate provocation. Ashley's co-workers exchanged uncertain glances, some beginning to wonder if they, too, had misjudged him. And in the back of the restaurant, the manager, who had quietly watched the entire evening unfold, finally stood up from his office. He looked toward the door, then at Ashley, a stern expression on his face. "Let's have a word," he said, his tone firm. Keanu's quiet departure was a lesson not only in patience but in dignity. And in the end, it was Ashley's own behavior that had been truly exposed for what it was: unprofessional, petty, and, ultimately, a reflection of her inability to recognize the true worth of a person. Now completely still, the tension palpable in the air. All eyes were fixed on Keanu, who had not raised his voice but commanded attention in a way that silenced the room. The weight of his words hung in the air like a heavy silence, and Ashley, standing beside the manager, looked as though she had just been caught in the act. The manager, still visibly unsettled, nodded solemnly, his gaze unwavering as he addressed the situation. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Reeves," he said with a deep sense of regret. I apologize for the way this has been handled. It's unacceptable. Ashley opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She had miscalculated, everything had been calculated wrong. The restaurant, once her domain of superiority, now felt suffocating. The very room that had once filled her with confidence now seemed to close in on her. Keanu glanced around the dining room, his expression still calm, but his words clear and firm. Everyone deserves respect, he said quietly. Not because of their appearance, but simply because they are people. The elderly man at the other table, who had been observing the scene, raised his glass in a silent gesture of approval. The couple that had whispered in disbelief earlier now exchanged glances, nodding in agreement. More than a few patrons were clearly moved by Keanu's composure, their gazes turning sympathetic toward him. Ashley's cheeks burned with humiliation, but there was nowhere for her to hide. The manager, sensing the growing tension, stepped forward. I will ensure that this situation is addressed immediately, Mr. Reeves, he said, his voice now one of absolute sincerity. Please accept our deepest apologies for this poor display of service. Keanu nodded, the slight smile never leaving his face. Thank you, he said simply. And, if possible, I'd appreciate it if you could speak to your staff about how we treat all guests. We should always lead with respect. With that, Keanu stood up, his movements fluid and graceful. He exchanged a brief nod with the manager, who was now speaking in hushed tones to Ashley. As Keanu made his way toward the door, the atmosphere in the room shifted. What had begun as an uncomfortable encounter now became a defining moment, a moment in which dignity, kindness, and respect reigned. Ashley stood frozen, her face pale and her mind racing. The weight of the situation had finally settled in. The lesson had been learned, but it was too late to undo the damage. The room seemed to murmur with an unspoken understanding, the eyes of the diners no longer filled with judgment, but with a newfound respect for the man who had shown them all what true grace under pressure looked like. As the door swung open and Keanu stepped out into the night, the quiet in the restaurant lingered for a long moment before the soft murmur of conversation slowly began to fill the air once again. But now, the tone had shifted. Conversations were quieter, more thoughtful, and a certain reverence had been established for the man who had walked in as just another customer and left as someone far more remarkable than anyone had expected, and the people within it. Keanu's words resonated deeply, echoing in the stillness of the room. The staff, who had been a mix of guilt, embarrassment, and defensiveness, now seemed to be listening with a new kind of openness. Some exchanged glances, others nodded subtly, but all were feeling the weight of the moment. Keanu's presence had shifted the dynamic, not just by his status, but by the grace and understanding he showed in dealing with the situation. There was a quiet power in the way he spoke, not of condemnation, but of possibility. The atmosphere, thick with tension earlier, now felt different, softer, as though a new understanding had begun to take root. Ashley, her face flushed with the remnants of her earlier anger and now regret, stood up straighter, as though the words had not just reached her mind, but her very heart. She took a long, steadying breath. I'll do better, she said, her voice more stable now, though still trembling slightly. I want to be better. Keanu gave her a nod, his expression warm, understanding. That's all anyone can do, he said. We all have room to grow. The key is never to stop trying. The manager, who had remained mostly silent during the discussion, now stepped forward, his own demeanor a bit more humble than before. Mr. Reeves, again, I am deeply sorry for what transpired tonight. I will ensure that this lesson is ingrained in all our team members and that our service reflects the values you've spoken of. Keanu gave him a reassuring smile. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. We can always be better, and it's the effort that counts. The staff nodded, some looking as though they were seeing their workplace in an entirely new light. The manager looked at Ashley again, offering a final piece of advice. Ashley, this is your chance to make things right, not just for Mr. Reeves, but for every guest who walks through our doors from now on. Ashley's eyes shimmered, but this time with determination rather than frustration. I understand, she said quietly, her voice steady. And I'm grateful for this chance. As the meeting drew to a close, the team began to file out, each person carrying something more, perhaps a renewed sense of responsibility, a deeper awareness of their actions, and an understanding of the impact they could have on others. Keanu remained behind for a moment, observing the staff as they filtered out of the room, then turned to the manager. "Thank you for your understanding," he said sincerely. The manager nodded, his expression respectful. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves, for handling this with such grace. You've not only made a difference tonight, but you've given us all something to think about." With a final nod, Keanu left the room, his presence still lingering in the air like a quiet reminder. The restaurant would change, the staff would grow, and perhaps, in some small way, the world outside the walls of Lumiere would too. The manager lingered for a moment before speaking quietly to Ashley. "You've got a lot of work ahead of you," he said, but there was no judgment in his voice, only the understanding of someone who had seen the possibility of change in someone willing to try. "I'm ready," Ashley replied. And for the first time that night, her voice was filled not with the sharp edge of defensiveness, but with the quiet conviction of someone determined to be different. A deep sense of quiet satisfaction settled over Keanu as he continued his walk down the sidewalk, the weight of the evening's events gently pressing on his chest. The city was alive, as it always was, people rushing in every direction, the hum of distant conversations, the flicker of neon lights casting an energetic glow on the bustling streets. Yet, in the midst of all that movement, Keanu felt something different, something rare, an almost peaceful stillness in his heart. He wasn't just walking, he was reflecting, thinking about the small yet significant shift he'd just helped create. The satisfaction he felt wasn't just from standing up for himself. It wasn't about winning or proving a point. It was something deeper, more subtle. Keanu understood, as he walked past the towering buildings and the throng of people, that sometimes it wasn't the grand gestures that made the biggest impact. Often, it was those quiet, seemingly insignificant moments, the ones that didn't demand attention, that had the power to change everything. As he moved forward, his mind wandered back to the scene at Lumiere, replaying the interactions in his head. He thought of how so many people, far too often, found themselves being dismissed or overlooked, not because they lacked value, but because someone else had decided their worth based on surface-level judgments. He thought of Ashley, who had been caught in her own assumptions, and how she tried to elevate herself by belittling another. But in the end, it wasn't about exposing her wrongs, it was about offering her, and everyone else in that room, a chance to reflect, to see things in a different light. To recognize that no one was defined by their clothes, their status, or their external appearances. For Keanu, it wasn't even the confrontation that had made the difference. It was the simple fact that he chose to stay calm, to engage with compassion instead of anger. He didn't just challenge Ashley's behavior, he opened up a space for others to question their own assumptions. He hadn't intended to create an upheaval. He simply wanted to create a moment of pause, one that allowed everyone involved to consider the impact of their actions on others. As he walked under the soft glow of the street lamps, their light flickering like distant stars, Keanu thought about how much power lay in those quiet moments, the moments when we choose to extend empathy instead of judgment, when we decide to see someone as more than just a stereotype. What if, he wondered, everyone took a moment every day to simply pause and look beyond the surface of things? To listen, really listen, to the person standing in front of them? Would the world shift, just a little? Would we begin to understand each other better? In the stillness of the night, Keanu began to realize that this was the true essence of kindness, not in the big acts or grand gestures that often grab the spotlight, but in the subtle choices we make every day. The choice to extend a little more grace, a little more understanding, especially when it's hard. Kindness, he realized, wasn't something that could be easily measured. It was a way of life, a way of seeing and interacting with the world, and it had the potential to ripple out and transform everything it touched. He thought about how, for so many people, the feeling of being seen, of being recognized for who they truly were, could change their entire experience of the world. It could make all the difference in how they showed up for themselves and others. And as Keanu strolled down the familiar streets, the quiet sense of assurance in his heart grew stronger. The world, for all its complexities and contradictions, still held room for kindness. And if we all made it a priority, he believed, we might just begin to reshape the world into something more connected, more compassionate. For Keanu, that thought, that belief in the power of small moments, carried him through the rest of the night. It filled him with a quiet resolve that, no matter how small or unnoticed, every act of kindness mattered. Even in the toughest situations, even in moments of challenge, there was always a chance to do better, to make a difference. And in that, Keanu found a sense of peace, knowing that the change he wished to see in the world was something he could help create, not through grand gestures, but through the steady, simple practice of choosing kindness every single day.